Serious, campers of Reddit, what is the scariest, creepiest, most disturbing thing that has happened to you in the woods? When I was younger, around 14 or 15 years old, my family used to camp at a state park. Every night my friend and I would walk through the woods. We called this the ritual. This particular night we decided to walk further into the woods than usual. We had flashlights, we liked to try and navigate through the woods with them turned off. We were about half a mile from the nearest campsite when we heard soft whispering behind us. Obviously we hit the flashlights and spun around. Didn't see anything. So we kept walking and we hear it again. This time we stop and look around a bit before we decided to head back to our campsite. Then we see what's whispering. It's a lady crawling on the ground whispering just random words. She was wearing dark clothes and was covered in dirt. When she sees that we notice her, she stands up and declares that she is looking for her campsite. We ended up walking her back to the campground and tried helping her find her group. Turns out she was just super drunk, high, and got lost trying to find a bathroom. Her friends didn't even notice she was missing, and if we didn't go that far into the woods she would have been lost all night. It was pretty creepy. I'm picturing a witch crawling on the ground calling you my pretties. Went camping in Ginny Springs in Florida about 10 years ago, and sometime at night I heard that sound you hear in movies TV of a huge tree falling. Didn't think anything of it. About 10 minutes later I started hearing lots of people talking outside my tent, so I got out and discovered the tree fell on someone's tent kind of close by and killed them. A helicopter had to come and airlift them out. Safari guide here. Woke up one morning with something very warm, rather soft and comfy on my back. Realized my back was against the canvas of the tent. Realized it was an animal. It was a really cold winter night. Temperatures dropped close to zero here in the low vault. WTF. As I moved a bit, I heard the voice from my buddy, from his tent. He spoke a bit hushed, and with a definite tremble in his voice. The Africa bug, are you awake? Stupid me replied with a strong voice. Yes. The animal next to me got up, and, luckily, ran away. It was a big male lion. My cat does the same. When it's cold outside, she likes to snuggle up behind my back. The lion was just a big kitty who wanted to cuddle. I was camping in a valley by myself with no cell service. I stayed late on a trail and ran into a nice local dude as it was getting dark. He showed me a local camping spot close to the road and the river, but camouflaged. I had a fire, drank beer, and listened to my friend's comedy podcast. I was loud and visible. Because it was dark already, I decided to sleep in the back of my truck under my topper next to all of my gear as opposed to setting up my tent. The next morning I made a fire, cracked a beer, and started making breakfast. Then I notice that there is a man at the edge of my camp. He comes closer, but never looks directly at me. This dude looks homeless, has a long ratty beard, and has at least 100 plastic grocery bags tied all over his clothes. I comment about how nice the day is. No response from him. I offer him breakfast. Nothing. He sort of paces around the perimeter of my camp. I offer him a beer, but he just turns around. The dude is just standing there back to me, wandering around. I'm realizing that there isn't going to be any good happenings. I had my bear spray and buck knife super close. I give him an ultimatum. Mother, you are either going to acknowledge me or leave immediately. He ignores me. I grab the bear mace and walk a few steps towards him. He sulked away and I threw my crap in my truck and left that place right quick. I wonder if he had watched me during the night, and I thank my laziness for staying in my truck instead of a tent. Camping alone in a bit of secluded bushland. Lots of sticks and leaf litter so can hear critters and people moving easily. Hearing a plopping noise during the night, but no other noises. To wake up to see a decapitated kangaroo's head next to the tent that obviously wasn't there when I put the tent up. No explanation. Got the F out of there. Went camping with my friends back in high school. We hiked way out into the woods mountains and collapsed exhausted into our tents. Middle of the night, I hear something outside my tent. Then another something, and another, all around the tent. It sounded so much to me like something stalking up to our tent, surrounding it. I gathered my courage and looked out, shining my flashlight in at the pitch black darkness. All I could see in the dark was shining eyes looking back at me. Not little eyes or eyes close to the ground, but almost man-height and large. Turned out it was a herd of deer. It was 2 AM, pitch dark, low fire. We heard rustling in the woods. Flashlights pan out. All of a sudden a mole comes running towards us and into the fire. We could hear it sizzling while we all were screaming. The next day the charred body was buried with a proper funeral. Suicide by campfire. That's pretty brutal. My wife and I were camping alone in a kind of remote area, but there were little campsites made by the park's depth that were flat and clear. We found a great looking spot, but it was right on a lake which I thought was to be avoided. But we were beginner backpackers and figured the park's depth wouldn't make a spot there if it wasn't safe, so we set up camp mid-afternoon. I was feeling a little beat, so I took a short nap while my wife read a book. When I woke up she told me that somebody was walking around in our campsite. I looked around but didn't see anything. There were some other campsites maybe 500 feet away, so I figured it was another camper checking the place out. Late that night, after we'd gone to bed for the night, it was drizzling a little rain and I was sort of half asleep at probably 2 or 3 am. Then I realized that if I listened really closely I could hear someone walking around our campsite, very quietly. I didn't have a knife or any sort of weapon and started freaking out. I carefully woke my wife up to get her ready and we listened together. Then suddenly we heard it. It sounded like a cat cleaning itself. We have cats. Then more walking around in circles around the tent. Then the sound of a large cat lapping up water just feet from our tent. Then walking back to the tent. Immediately beside me, I heard it flop down on the ground. Cat owners know how a relaxed cat flops over. It was like that but way bigger. I was trying to control my breathing as carefully as I could so it wouldn't hear me, but I was so panicked it was hard to do. It hung around for what seemed like a long time. I really had to pee, but I wasn't ready to move or breathe, let alone go out there. The scariest part is that the whole time, it was so quiet that if you didn't concentrate you couldn't be sure that it was even there. So when I think it left, well, it might have been way before or way after it actually left. No idea. Eventually I was sure I hadn't heard it in a long time, so I very cautiously poked my head out. Didn't see anything. It was pitch black. Did my business. Went back to bed. The next morning we get up and there are massive paw prints in our campsite. Looks just like a cat's paw print, but more like 8 inches across. Later after getting home I called the park ranger to let them know in case they're monitoring encounters with dangerous animals or something. I dunno. I'm not a wilderness expert, and they told me it must have been a mountain lion, and how lucky I was to have an encounter with one. When I think about my wife telling me that someone was in our campsite around 12 hours earlier than the encounter, it creeps me right out to think that we might have been stalked by a mountain lion for some time. I love that it just acted like a normal cat. I had a nasty thunderstorm that spawned a tornado roar over me one night. The tornado cut a path a couple of kilometers away. At one point the lightning was almost continuous. No choice but ride it out. My parents' story, not mine. They were on a canoe trip way up in nowhere, Saskatchewan, far from any semblance of civilization. One morning, they hear a rustling outside their tent. Still half asleep, my dad sits up and tries to figure out what is going on. The noise is loud and very close. Before he can collect himself enough to go investigate, his whole side of the tent collapses in on top of him. The weight lifted quickly. Now entirely awake, my parents scrambled to open the tent flap and figure out what was going on. About 10 feet away was a spooked black bear, staring confused and concerned at the tent. After being yelled at a bit, it ran off. We figure it had been foraging in the bushes right behind the tent and lost its balance. So my dad can truthfully say he has been sat on by a bear. I love how the bear was just sitting there confused and concerned like, oh golly me, I hope I didn't hurt anything. Oh, they're mad. I will leave now friends, so sorry, goodbye. We like to hike 3-5 miles down a trailhead in deep Georgia. One night the temperature dropped into the low 20s, which is really rare for mid-fall. We got a solid fire going, and the heat mixed with a full belly put us all to sleep. I woke up to my buddy tapping my foot with a stick. I looked up at him and he nodded toward the fire. There were 2 wild boar kicking up dirt around the dying fire. We didn't have any sort of weaponry except a hand axe that was out of our reach. My friend and I laid there completely silent watching these 2 for about an hour till the fire died completely down and they moved on. If you don't know, wild boars in Georgia are easily 150 pounds, pee all the time, and prone to gore literally anything. We were really lucky we didn't spook them. They were clearly just concerned about the fire going with no one watching it and kicked dirt on it until it went out. My time in the army meant I spent a ton of time in the woods of upstate NY. I remember many of nights waking up to things reaching into my pockets, pulling things from my kit body armor. I'd wake up to a raccoon pillaging my things, literally unzipping pouches and such. I still swear to this day they were organized, rallied behind this giant raccoon frick stick who would sit outside and keep guard and coordinate them. Raccoons are super resourceful little suckers. Goddamn trash pandas. My family went camping every summer when I was growing up. We usually bounced between Virginia Beach, Assateague, and this god-awful place called Westmoreland. One trip we were in Assateague, near the beach, and we had 2 tents set up in different parts of the site. Sometime in the middle of the night my mom woke up, which woke me. She was sitting up straight but completely still, and I looked over at what she was staring at. In the moonlight there was the silhouette of what looked like an old woman looking into our tent. Long wiry hair and everything. I was young, so it terrified me, and I started asking my mom what that was, who was outside. Once I made noise it spooked the old woman and she took off, and that's when we realized she was actually one of the feral ponies that live on the island. We had set up that particular tent on one of their trails, and they were going down to the beach. I'm not sure why, but I find this story so cheering. I know someone who, while hiking in Colorado with some friends, they found an abandoned cabin. In a roughly circular region around the cabin, everything inside was dead. Plants, small animals, etc. They didn't step inside and have no idea what was up. Sounds like you found the elusive Colorado nope. Scariest was camping with my wife when a windstorm blew up. I am talking trees being blown over, branches falling, the works. In a forest full of jack pine. The creepiest was camping with my best friend. We were in a semi-remote camping area. Drivable usually to get to it but definitely only with a 4x4. It was a semi-maintained camping area as in there were a couple of fire pits, a few rotten picnic tables and a run-down outhouse. Parks check this place once a year or so. So we get there and start setting up when Buddy wanders over to the toilet and opens the door. He stands there for a second or two and then closes the door and goes to the second one. Goes in and comes out a few minutes later. He comes back to me and says go check out that first one. I assume someone crap on the floor or an animal got stuck in there and died or something. Nope. 3 full backpacks. And I am talking big bags. Like the bag I have that size I use for week-long trips. So we are nosy. We open them up. 2 are full of good quality gear. Nothing unusual. The third is full of Skittles. Bulk bags. Small bags. Regular. Tropical, sour, every flavor and size of bag you can imagine. Just full of fricking Skittles. Camped for 4 days. Never saw the soul. Bags still there when we left. We let the COs know when we got to civilization. Who left all that gear? Why did one person pack 80 liters of Skittles? Don't know. But it was weird. Oh, another scary one. Dog and I were backpacking. Spur of the moment overnight trip. Wasn't far off the road or anything. So I just have a tarp up as a small shelter. Small little fire. Wasn't really hiding per se but wasn't being obvious. Just dozing off when I hear a truck rip up and a bunch of drunken voices. Then the shooting started. Now they probably didn't know I was there. I was parked on a different road and hadn't realized I had walked as close as I had to the second one. But I still don't like being in the area when a bunch of drunken yahoos are shooting off guns. Especially when I was fairly certain they were shooting in my direction, based on the lay of the land. So I put Papa on a tight leash and headed out ASAP. A backpack full of Skittles abandoned in the bathroom. What the actual frick? Saw a mountain lion looking at me from about 100 feet away while pooping. Good thing I had a gun with me just in case, but it was at my most vulnerable moment. Also it really helped me take a crap faster. 25 years ago or so. Saw eyes in the darkness of the trees when shining a flashlight out. Seemed kinda high up. They were red reflecting. Also was having sticks and rocks occasionally thrown into our camp. Nothing big and it was directed at the fire. Eventually it stopped and we went to bed. There was 4 of us. I'm a light sleeper and so is my dad. We both woke up to footsteps and a really bad stink about 5 AM. My dad shook the side of the tent and yelled get the frick out of here, whatever it was. It ran off. Cowlitz Country, WA. Well, that is where I am now, so thank you. You have been visited by the swole skeleton. He'll give you good calcium if you subscribe in 5 seconds. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.